Good afternoon to some of you, like in Portugal and Europe, and good morning to the others. They are in United States or in Canada. So welcome all of you, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar. I would like especially thank you our speakers, Dr. Belinha de Abreu and Professor Michael Hoshman. Professor Michael Hoshman with some issues and with some difficulties to come in this webinar, but I will hope that we'll arrange these difficulties. And thank you again to both of them so kindly and quickly accept our invitation to be part of this webinar. So before we begin, I would like to let you know that this session is being recorded. So you are welcome to turn off your cameras, but it's always better to speak face to face. It's nicer. Okay. Introducing myself before, I forgot about that. My name is Janaína Cardoso. I work in Aproximar. We are an organization based in Portugal, near Lisbon, in a town called Afragide. And we are, I'm going to be the person who being facilitating this webinar together with our speakers, that they are the experts in the field of media literacy. I'm here only to facilitate the conversation. Okay. So starting a brief, very brief introduction of Aproximar. Aproximar is a cooperative for social innovation whose mission is to enhance the human and social capital of organization as a sustainable response to emerging challenge and opportunities. Okay, so we work in many fields, in active aging and dependent care, criminal justice system, education and community empowerment, economy, entrepreneurship, and employability. And we have some departments that, like creative marketing, consultancy, programs and service, and the empowering talents. That the main purpose is to empower the talent of each person, organization, etc. In the middle of this atom, are main principles, values that are act, share, empower, train, cooperate, and sustain. It's a very brief explanation about Aproximar, but because we are here to listen to our specialists in media literacy, not about this in this moment. So, wait, just one more. This webinar is part of a series of webinars about media literacy. This cycle have the name of Reflections on Disinformation, Education and Society. Okay, this cycle, this series of webinars is a part of a project called MILES, is a European project that is meal and pre-booking approaches for critical thinking and education. And it's a space to offer reflections about the challenge that disinformation poses to education, citizenship, and democracy across European, North American, local context. Okay, it's a place to think about strategies, research, initiatives from schools, researchers, and civil society organizations about critical thinking and informed participation. You have to apologize me because my mother language is not English but Portuguese. I'm trying so hard not to say anything that is not correct. Also like to explain this as a European project. So the other organizations that are implementing the MILES are doing also webinars. Okay, we have webinars in Greece, we have webinars in Austria, Romania, and here in Portugal also with the Proximar and another organization that is called OLAI. We are doing these webinars also. Okay. So about the webinar from today. Okay. The name of the webinar today is the Information and Education, North American Approaches to a Global Challenge. So in a global context where this information that we all know spreads rapidly, it's essential to understand how a different education system tackles this challenge. This webinar focuses on North American approaches, United States and Canada, and explores the practice, policies, strategies that schools, universities, research institutions, governments, and technology companies are implementing to promote media literacy, critical thinking, and informed citizenship. Okay, so about our speakers. Dr. Belinha de Abreu is a global media literacy educator. She serves as an international expert to the Forum on Media and Information Literacy, Forum UNESCO Communication and Information sections. Her research interests include media and information literacy education, educational technology, global perspectives, critical thinking, privacy and big data, civic discourse, young adults, and teacher training. Dr. de Abreu's focus in the impact of learning as a result of media and technology consumed by K-12 students, providing students with viable real-life opportunities for engaging in various technological environments, while in turn encouraging students to be creative and conscious users of technology media, and also speaks Portuguese. Okay, Michael Hoshman, I hope I'm saying the name correct, is a professor in the Faculty of Education of Lakehead University in Canada. His research focuses on digital and media literacies, cultural studies, and education in formal and non-formal settings. He is the vice chair of the board of MediaSmarts, Canada Centre for Digital and Media Literacy, and the chair of the Media Education Research section of the International Association for Media and Communication Research. Both of you, again, thank you so much for accept our invitation, and we can also only reading your biography that you be for me is going to be increased value to listen to you both in this webinar.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the structure today discussion will be work around a set of guiding questions. Our speaker's intervention will be developed in response to these questions, and we will later open the discussion to the audience. You can write in the chat your questions. You can write in Portuguese if you want, or in English, okay? So about our guiding questions, we have 5, and our speakers are going to answer, not in this order, but how they want to answer, okay? The first, how the cultural, social, and political context in North America shape the strategies used to educate young people about this information. 2, how our North American education system, United States and Canada, integrating media literacy and critical thinking into the curriculum to combat disinformation. How have North American governments and schools boards developed policies to support teachers and schools in addressing disinformation? And 4, what role of technology, okay, to support educational initiatives against misinformation? And 5, how North American universities and research institutes contribute again with this subject. So we are trying to listen to hear how government, schools, research are dealing with this subject. So I'm not speaking anymore for now because I think we are want to to hear it, both of you. Okay. So I stopped sharing the screen.
Great.
You can, I don't know if Belinda want to start.
Yes, no, I'll start. I don't know if
Dr.
Michael has
Belinda.
gotten in at all or not. So Vera and Janine, if you would let me know, that would be appreciated. I will know he did send me a thing that said that the link that he has says it's been used too many times, so he's not able to access it. But in the meantime, thank you.
I am
are you-
here.
Oh, excellent.
And
Wonderful.
I'm using this opportunity to test my microphone so that when you do pass it to me, yeah, so this is good.
It's
Wonderful.
good. It's good.
Sorry
Thank you.
to disturb you. Sorry to
Wonderful.
interrupt.
No, it's wonderful.
Thank
So
you.
this is so the way Michael and I actually talked about this. First, thank you for having us. I think on behalf of Michael and I can say that we are giving you a perspective, and both of our countries are very big and there's a lot going on. And so it is literally a snapshot. It is not to say that it encompasses every single solitary thing, but I think it gives you a very rounded look at what we see as approaches that are happening in both of our countries in the North American area. I am going to share my screen, and what we've done just to simplify things and to move it along, because this webinar ends around noon, is that correct? It ends okay. That we wanted to make sure there was enough time for both of us to cover the things that we needed to cover, and as well as give time for questions from the audience. And we do hope you have questions, because certainly that actually helps to make things move along very quickly too. So I'm going to share my screen, and we'll talk a little bit more about the different things that we've seen. One thing to note, though, is that you all disappear from my screen when I do this. So if there's something that you need from me or you need to have me move along, and Michael, if you want to jump in, just feel free to jump in, because I won't actually see you at all. Are you able to see my screen at this point?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Now it's
All right.
okay.
Excellent. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is definitely one of those areas where there is a lot going on in both of our countries. Certainly we've been in the news quite a bit, especially in the United States. And so it's important to recognize, I think, to just start off with that first question about social political context in North America. We don't have a set U.S. curriculum that is followed by every 50 states. We've had things like the Common Core, which some of you may have heard about, but the actual effect of that depends on what is happening in the world, and what is also happening right now in the United States. As many of you know, our Department of Education has shifted, and so unlike other countries, there is no set determination of how each state needs to conduct things, except that federal funding is part of the processes. So just to kind of take a step back, because some of the issues that we're talking about in media literacy, certainly in the United States and in Canada, have a lot to do what is happening around the world. And I wanted to give context to that, because despite the fact that in the US in particular, we don't have a curriculum, we do have media moments that get placed within the classroom in discussions within different subject areas. So the one big one that we can talk about very quickly is the smartphone bans, which are happening in the United States, which certainly have impacted the way in which we have had discourse about technology. In particular, I can tell you from the states in the Northeast, because this is the area that I live in, we've had a number of places where smartphones have been banned in schools. But keep in mind, as I said in the beginning, every state does things differently. And within the states themselves, there's also no 100% everybody is doing this unless the governor who spearheads the state says that this is what we are doing. So in my state, for example, that does not exist, but in the district that I do work in, they actually have the ban in place. So different towns next to me might not have the same kinds of things. We have had issues of free speech, which I want to acknowledge as being a part of the processes issues that have been going on. We certainly know that pop culture is definitely a big piece of that. So we've had a lot of media sensations and other issues that have taken part as part of the discussion. We have had political polarization, which is not, interestingly enough, just unique to the United States, but is something that has also happened in Canada. We are in the middle of mergers right now between big conglomerates like Netflix, Warner Brothers, and Paramount, which have been taking up the airways here And we certainly have had canceled research, which has happened consistently in the last several years here. And within the last 2 administrations, this has been a big part of the problem, and depending on who is in office and what it is that they want to see happening. This has trickles effects from higher education all the way down to public education. And it has changed the way in which even higher ed is focusing their work, especially in the United States. Certainly the wars have had an impact. It has had an impact in terms of dialogue, understanding of what is happening around the world, and also what is not understood. And I can tell you certainly that one of the issues that certainly has populated our media is the lack of historical context. And so that is something that has been a part of the dialogue as well. And the last piece, which is the AI part, we can't discuss what we're going to talk about without an acknowledgement that there are a lot of issues that have come up with AI, including ethics, of the lack of practicality of what that should look like in a classroom. It certainly is a part of teacher education in terms of what we're saying is allowable or not allowable. And frankly, there's a lot of talk about what that means in terms of the evolution of learners, which I think we should address as well as part of this dialogue. We are definitely at a point where the media has changed and shifted what it is that we perceive to be happening around us. We are at a time when democracy is shifting and changing. We have companies that have had an impact in the way in which we see things happening. We have had certainly the introduction of things like ChatGPT and other new forms of generative AI that are also thrown into the mix. We've seen the disintegration, frankly, of traditional news forms. And that has had impact in the way in which we think about teaching and learning, because that means there's no common place from which people are actually addressing some of the issues. We have certainly seen our data being taken and the issues of privacy have been put into it. And then we've also seen how things have been weaponized and changed. And that means that, the message that we think is coming from the media is not always truthful, verifiable, or easily to document. And that has changed the way in which people believe information exists. So the question, is truth dead, is something that has come up quite consistently. And that has impacted the way in which we are engaging with information. There was an article that came out in 2025, January of 2025, in the Atlantic called The Antisocial Century, and actually the generation piece as part of that. And the reality that because of the fact that we are not sharing common media, we're also receiving things differently and we're perceiving information differently, which is added to the polarization issues that we see ongoing, certainly in the United States. And that is probably in part why the smartphone issue had reached a certain point. Many of you know about the book by Jonathan Haidt called The Anxious Generation. It has had impact in countries all over the world. Australia certainly has definitely put in the most stringent piece of really banning the use of mobile technology, cell phone technology, smartphone use in particular, to 16 years old. And it is a movement that is certainly picked up here in the United States. And frankly, if the companies who were putting forth some of these tools were not probably based in the United States, we probably would have had this ban in place a long time ago. But with that being said, what it really has talked about is that we've had a disconnect between our society, and the things that we considered as part of the things that were normalized have changed. And we've had the rise of certainly issues, including mental health issues, as well as other medical things, because we are not, once again, sharing common language. So it transitioned into this idea of we're going to lock up the phones and change the way that looks. And there's a lot of discussion in the media literacy education world about whether or not this has been a good idea for media education, or whether or not this is a bad idea, because what are we teaching students when it comes to that? And where is the real world connection when we look at why it is that media education is so important and vital to teaching and learning? It has also shifted into the way in which we think about power issues, who gets to carry the message, speak the message, understand the message. When is it that we are all of a sudden, when did we decide that free speech was not free speech any longer? And how does that evolve into the way in which we look at information as well, and the context in which information is distributed and understood? And that has led to various things that we've seen politically across the United States, which I'm sure has been shared with all of you internationally as well at different times. And of course, the AI piece, which is concerning in and of itself because it also has added another lens and another opportunity for information in a positive way, yes, but also in a concerning way because the AI is pulling from information that exists as it is. So those are some of the issues that we're facing here within the United States alone. And one of the important things to note is that despite all of this, critical thinking is still a part of our educational processes, but it's coming from areas like our English classes or in our social studies classes. One thing to note is that within the National Council of Social Studies in the United States and the National Council of Teachers of English, in their guidelines for what standards should exist, there is a media literacy component. Under Este, which is the International Society of Technology Education, which has partnered up now with the administrative, the ASCD is our administrative role for educators in the United States. They've become one. They also talk about media literacy, but it tends to be broken into various components. Depending on who it is that's guiding the conversation, it focused more on the digital citizenship piece. And I think this is one of the issues that I've seen predominantly come up that frankly is problematic on my end, especially because of the fact that media literacy took shape in the United States when we started associating it with misinformation. Before that, we were starting to talk about it in terms of technologies and digital citizenship, but then it took a step back because of the fact that misinformation became so transcendent, and it was something that was obvious and something that was being dialogued over and over again, certainly by the mass media. And also it added another sphere in terms of how people understood what media literacy education is, because as you may be aware, that certainly the defining of media literacy as an actual literacy has always come with its own issues. And so having it in a place that you could say, well, we know that technology is a problem, we really need to address issues, or to say misinformation is a problem, we need to address this in a classroom, has more of a connectivity to parents and policymakers. The other group that's in here is the American Association of School Librarians, because if we look at where a lot of media literacy instruction is coming from, it is definitely coming from the librarians and school library media specialists in the schools. And if we were to document that on a national level, we would see that now in the United States. The other organization that I wanted to mention here is Media Literacy Now, because they have been the ones who have been trying to drive the policy piece in the States. Once again, I think that this has come with its own, the limitations of it, or what it actually looks like, is very different from state to state. So for example, I'm in the state of Connecticut, and there is when you look at the Media Literacy Now website, it'll say, you know, there's a media literacy component in the state of Connecticut. But as an educator in the state, I can tell you that it's just written in words in a document at the state level, but it has no basis actually when it comes down to the school level. And it keeps changing. So it was once again in the digital citizenship realm, and then it became put into the civics realm because, you know, we're also looking at this from the polarization end. And so it's been stagnant. As much as I think it has a possibility for evolution, it's also been stagnated. There was a RAND report that was done that said that, you know, media literacy standards should support the curbing of truth decay. And while I appreciate that very much, I often think that we've limited media literacy to these very small segments, because media literacy is about thinking. And that process of thinking about information is larger than just truth decay. It's about many factors, many different components, some of which I mentioned from the beginning, that, you know, pop culture has a piece in this. The fact that there is a global communication piece in this, that has to be there. And we all tend to limit things when we say it just should be here, and we root our evidence in this one area. So these are things that have continued to be problematic here in the United States, which is why we don't tend to have a cohesive point of entry when it comes to media literacy. There's lots of different types of media literacy programs, and there's lots of curriculum out there, to be honest with you. I always find it really interesting because people say we don't have curriculum, but there's lots of curriculum that have been written by many organizations that could be adapted in various different ways. The difference is that, of course, that here in the US, we don't own it in that way, and we don't circulate it with state to state frequency, which is also shaped some of the problems. Let's see. I did mention this already, but I do want to talk very briefly about this impact of technology and social media platforms in terms of educational initiatives. Before 2025, I would say that a lot of money was being distributed in various ways from platforms like Google, like Facebook, and Twitter before it was X. So that there would be some form of education. One of the things that I think about this that has become very evident is that on paper, it looks great. And I think this is one of those things where companies give money to definitely highlight that they're doing something to help with the mis and disinformation problem. And we saw a lot of that being said and done, especially after 2016. But that has shifted quite a bit. There is literally no money in these areas coming necessarily for these purposes any longer. And the problem is that, you know, while Americans certainly in the US believe that we should have some federal accountability when it comes to social media companies, and that we should have much more in place with these, that hasn't happened. And over the course of probably the last 15 years, I have watched hearing after hearing after hearing where there were obvious issues with how information was being distributed, how things were being reached out to young adults and so forth. And the hearings happen. There's a lot of, I feel like there's a circus actually around it, but then nothing ends up coming from it. And so, in fact, in terms of what we see here, we don't really see as much that could be happening as should be happening with that. And all of these things, when I look back, if I were to actually ask anybody who has received money from any of these companies, what can you actually say has been done with all of that? I don't think there's anything to show for it. And I often look for it and I see things like a white paper, but the white paper doesn't go anywhere. And it certainly doesn't reach policymakers in the way that we hope. And it definitely doesn't reach schools. So one of the things that I will tell you on my end that has often become a realization is that for educators, in particular in the United States, having a policy doesn't support what happens at the ground level in the schools. Oftentimes when curriculums are built, they tend to be built without a teacher being present in the actual building of the curriculum at the policy level, which is incredibly problematic. That is true even when organizations are developing this, that there are times when those organizations, while they accept money and they take funding for these purposes, those people are also not in a classroom creating curriculum that benefits teachers. And instead it benefits a policymaker, but actually doesn't address the issues that we're seeing in the classroom. And so it's important to note that because that has also added to some of the problems that we are seeing with the way in which media literacy and any actually form of media literacy education, should it become a national curriculum, definitely needs to have educators present to be a part of that dialogue. Otherwise, there will not be the same kind of reception that would be needed for a teacher to actually take a core piece of work and actually put it into their classroom. So I'm going to stop there so that I can give my colleague, Michael, an opportunity as well to have this dialogue with all of you. And I just have to, stop sharing on my end. And Michael, I'm going to toss it to you so you can continue the dialogue.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
And you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is very good. Boa tarde. Meu nome é Michael Hirschman, mas não falo português. Si hablo español, yo doy congresos en España y Latinoamérica.
Thank you.
So today's comments are entirely in English. So I'm going to start with a little bit.
Michael, maybe you
yes?
can, yes, click in the presentation because you are seeing all of your screen. Yeah.
Yeah,
In
okay.
the
Is that better? That's, oh, I see. Yeah, slide, right. Yeah, just
yes.
current slide. Okay. So, yeah, I just want to start with an overview. There was this report conducted for the Canadian government in 2024, and it's all the risks that are possible in the world. And you look on the left side, it's enough to make you not sleep for a week. There's a lot of very frightening things that could happen. But what you'll see is that if you go up, the higher it is, the higher the impact. World War is the top, right? But the further to the right is the higher the likelihood. And you'll see that disinformation in another guise is there. People cannot tell what is true and what is not. And they're saying this is going to have a high impact and it's a high likelihood. So later in the report, it shows when will all these things happen. And 3 years after 2024, which means next year, people cannot tell what is true and what is not. So I start wondering whether or not how productive the word disinformation is. I'm concerned, in fact, that it does a little bit of obfuscation of its own. It generalizes. And I guess I'm starting to wonder if it's a little bit like a weather report. Like today, there's a high likelihood of disinformation. This might even be a once-in-a-century event if there's a terrible storm. But typically, we'll just, there's a cloudiness. Like discourse will never be clear again. And what we need in that situation is media literacy to solve that problem. And we sort of see it as a natural outcome of our web, both the participatory web 2.0 and the data web 3.0. And I'd like to turn the question to, who are the disinformers and why are we being manipulated? So maybe I'd like to see disinformation more as a verb than a noun. So to disinform rather than disinformation. And it reminds me of this book by Stuart Hall and colleagues from the 1970s. I thought I had the date there. Okay. Anyway, they talk about the way the word mugging, and mugging is an English word. It means to be robbed on the street with a bit of violence, right? But when the word mugging was brought to England, all sorts of previous crimes and misdemeanors disappeared because everything became mugging. And if you think about disinformation, we're no longer talking about propaganda. We're no longer talking about obfuscation and manipulation, deception, all those things. It's all been subsumed. So we have this tsunami of disinformation, and yet we also have a longer history. So here, I don't need to speak to this. I think you can look at it kind of briefly. But my point here is that, in fact, we're in this era where disinformation is a dominant term, but we have a legacy that I have above, propaganda, lies, etc. And then there's also some emergent factors, and we should take these all into consideration. So this is a much broader context. And the photo on the bottom right, by the way, that was an exhibit in downtown Madrid. So I started thinking about this old journal, the Quarterly Review of Doublespeak. Okay, I had a stack of these. I had like 12 of them when I was doing my master's degree. And it was produced by someone called Bill Lutz in the United States. And but it came from the National Council of Teachers of English. And so that's very interesting. And this is actually an early version of teachers. National Council of Teachers of English is an organization that sort of is in that intersection between the university professors and school teachers. And there they were in 1971 debating whether or not to pursue one, you can see those two at the bottom, preparing children to cope with commercial propaganda, and also entering the public sphere to look at combating semantic distortion by public officials, candidates for office, etc. And they give an example. So they were doing an annual award, etc. And I think this is an important history. So like for 50 years, we have this history of language teachers in the United States talking and thinking about distortions of language, and what was being used, this word doublespeak from George Orwell. Other things like bafflegab, and if you look at those terms of service agreements, when we sign up for any app right now, we're shown 30 pages of legal text, and we're asked, do we approve of this, right? And the kids in our school are doing that. Well, in the Journal of Doublespeak, they used to call that bafflegab. They had a word for it, language just that overwhelms you, and you can't really do much about it. So alongside that, I want to raise this question that maybe some disinformation makes people feel good, so that in fact there's a demand side for disinformation. This is a report from the United States, the Aspen Institute from 2021. And they're saying, look, it's a much bigger, complex issue. Mis and disinformation don't exist in a vacuum, and that disinformation pours lighter fluid on the sparks of discord. That means, conflict that exists in every community. And they say the reality, disinformation and information campaigns don't magically create bigotry, misogyny, racism, etc., and that there's a demand for disinformation. So if you look actually at some of what's going on right now, disinformation has taken a visual turn, right? So memes are used in disinformation, and those memes right now, there's a sort of a trope. Trope means figure of speech, deeply embedded, of the cowboy and the mountains and everything, and homeland and taking our home back. So this is being used right now as a form of disinformation, and there's an absolute demand for it. There's no question that some people are not preferring that. So I want to raise that question, are we dealing with echo chambers where people are just simply living in polarized spaces, or is something more happening? And Steve Bannon, this character that was involved in the first version of the Trump government, he was also very involved in Cambridge Analytica in Britain. And he was one of those people that showed an early interest in how data could be used to could be managed and massaged in a manner that would draw people in, right? So he's a particularly clever sort of personality that's involved here. So yeah, if you look online, people talk about performance-driven media, that we want to get engagement, so we want to excite people, make them angry or afraid or what have you. The societies are increasingly polarized here in North America, and there's something I'm going to call professional lying going on. Like there's actually, it's happening across the board, and it's not only direct manipulations, but it's also overgeneralizations. Like our political settings are such, even in Canada as well, that that two sides of any political dimension, one side's always arguing for itself, and it's a lot like, Zeynep Tufekci says, it's a lot like a sporting match where you believe in your own side and you don't really believe, you're not willing to believe anything else. So it gets really messy. And here we are, tan lejos de Dios, tan cerca los Estados Unidos. We're as our Mexican cousins say, so far from God, so close to the United States. And some of what we're seeing, that polarization is leaking over. And one of the things is the idea of woke. Woke is a term that's used to close debate and to generalize across a great number of different factors. And that's really entered into our political discourse since about 2023. And then the other thing is conspiracy thinking and conspiracy theories. And I have some pictures here of the occupation of Ottawa. It was the trucker convoy. But I was doing research on that at the time, and I've come to see that, in fact, there's a lot of connection across these various conspiracies, and that I'm calling this a metonymic cluster. So one stands in for another. A metonymy is like the crown representing the Queen of England or something like that. Metonymy is not a metaphor. It operates on a horizontal line rather than a vertical line. And so if anybody mentions World Economic Forum, any of these other terms can be mobilized at the same time. And that's very interesting. It means that there's lots of very shorthand ways of doing, high-level disinformation, where the use of a single term, the dropping of a name, suddenly, makes people discount a lot of other things. And the British journalist, academic George Monbiot, has that term conspiracy fictions. He's saying, look, there's lots of things to get worried about today, but why do so many people obsess about false stories? Let's set some of the background and some of what I'm thinking. Here in Canada, first of all, Ontario, where I'm living, had the first public, government-approved media literacy curriculum in the world was, published in 1989. That's up there in the top left corner, media literacy. And it became part of the English language curriculum. There is a brand new language curriculum that's just come out right now in 2025. And the Media Smarts organization, which is Canada Centre for Digital and Media Literacy, was consulted. They had a strong hand in this. So they've merged these terms now, digital literacy and media literacy, into digital media literacy. And there's a number of expectations, but I've dropped right there. You can see the term misinformation and disinformation is directly in that area of research and information literacy. And Belina was talking about the importance of the librarians. And this is an area that teacher librarians, librarians in universities as well, would typically cover. But the idea is that teachers will as well. And I also given you the image here of the Association for Media Literacy. So that's a teacher-led grassroots organization that's been in existence since the 1980s. It's actually founded by someone who took a graduate class with Marshall McLuhan. His name was Barry Duncan, and the Association for Media Literacy continues right now, and one of its members, Neil Anderson, who's the president, was around for this. His name is inside that media literacy curriculum you'll see there. So we have a long-standing tradition. This is work that's been ongoing, and the resources are really terrific. We have a lot that's really positive. So I mentioned Media Smarts. Media Smarts had a licensing agreement with school boards for several decades, so it would create curriculum that would not be open to the general public. It was sort of paid by school districts and et cetera. And so Media Smarts developed quite a strong foothold into, basically teaching settings across the country. We, like the United States, do not have a national curriculum. We have provincial curricula, and that has much to do with the fact that we have the province of Quebec, which wants to control its own sort of cultural and educational circumstances. But so I'm sharing with you here one of the Media Smarts campaigns, the Break the Fake, which also shows you this little hippopotamus. And the hippopotamus, the house hippo, was created in 1999 by Concerned Children's Advertisers. It's a very well-known icon here in Canada. Right, and I work with university students today, and they all grew up with the house hippo. So it's really kind of amazing how that the whole cycle is returning. But right now, the house hippo in 2025 is working on artificial intelligence. So the house hippo has been busy at work for 27 years. And so I'm just dropping a little bit of stuff from the Media Smarts, and I'll run into the final bit here. I'm about one or 2 minutes from closing. Yes, the role of the telecom and media companies, it's really often secondhand. Like, there has been moments where I think we pretty much follow what happens in the US in terms of, when the social media companies put up their own vetting software, they create mechanisms to identify disinformation and to react to it. But that happens on the one hand, and we don't really control that. The other thing that Canadian telecom and media companies will do is fund research and fund media literacy programs and Media Smarts. I have here a list of their corporate partners at the bottom, and you'll see Google is there, Meta, TikTok, and YouTube. Also, Bell and TELUS are Canadian telecommunication companies. And then we also have the National Film Board, which has existed for almost 100 years here in Canada, as well as Aboriginal People's Television Network. And those are the people I sit around the board with, which is all very interesting. So, yeah, and then on the flip side, we have this problem now where Meta decided to go to war with the Canadian government around a law that the Canadian government tried to put into place, which was suggesting that these big social media companies should pay Canadian news organizations for the production of news. Because what happened, I'm sure it's the same in the US and in Europe, is that the advertising basis for everyday media has moved into the social media. So the social media has basically swallowed up all of the advertising dollars. And when the Bill C-18 was put into place in 2023, Google complied and gave Canadian newspapers $100 million. And Meta said no. And what we're going to do instead is we're going to block all circulation of news. And you can see here from this statement that the Canadian publishers have lost engagement, and there's a concern about increased disinformation. So Meta is setting up a very difficult and problematic reaction. And at the bottom, I have that note to myself, Canada's issue of digital sovereignty. We don't control much of what's now being applied across our society. And it's even become an issue of the current U.S. government that they won't let us make even modest sort of changes. Like there was a goal to put a tax onto the monthly fee that people pay for Netflix. And the American government's reacting almost violently to that. And yeah, this is our problem. Like Canadian universities, our data is primarily stored in the United States, and this is becoming more and more of an issue. So, we don't really know yet. We haven't built we haven't fortified our digital future, and that's a problem. And I think I'm on to my last. Oh yeah, well, right. So some of the research, and I just suggest if you have some time to go to the Media Smarts website. There's a lot of terrific research. Young Canadians in the Wired World has been going on now for a couple of decades. Yeah, about 20 years. And here's a couple of reports, one from 2023 and one from 2025 that deal with this information. And I put one up to show you that it is in Français as well. Like, so everything that Media Smarts produces is produced in English and in French. I have some material below from the 2023 report, and you'll see that in fact, these young people are raising a lot of concerns that maybe the platforms are not doing enough to screen for disinformation and to support the issues young people are having. But I feel like I'm running out of time, and I won't dig through that, but I will encourage you to look at it yourselves and to see. Yeah, I mean, we were asked about universities, so like in Portugal, we have initiatives, right? So these are just some of them. I don't have time to get into them, but we are concerned. We are doing the work. There's some really great scholars here, and I think there's surely some great scholars on our call right now. So I'm going to stop sharing and look forward to the conversation.
Okay, thank you, Professor Michael. I invite to everyone who wants to make questions to write in the chat, and you can write in Portuguese. We can translate, don't worry. So I was listening to you both. I don't know where to start, but because it was a very, very amazing information. But I want to start with Professor Michael, because I am reading in this moment a book called The the lessons for the 21 lesson to the 21 century, okay? And the author talks about information, not about disinformation, but make me think that this information appears at the same time that the Homo sapiens, the man, okay? It's true, okay? But you said something that for me was the answer for, but how? Because I think, but if it appears at the same time, why? Because in this moment is a tool, a weapon. In this moment, the misinformation, malinformation, and you say something that the disinformation in this moment is a symptom, and not a cause, because we have to take that paper of disinformation and look more. Okay, disinformation non gives racism, non give us anything. So we have more deeper community issues that are appearing with this tool. Okay, so that make me think. Okay, for me was like a way to studying my thought. Okay, you are understanding me, because I am saying and thinking at the same time. I'm sorry. Because I never thought about it. This information is a symptom about something. It's not. I don't know. You understand me?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's really worth talking about, right? Like, we really should get in there a little bit more deeply. And our colleagues in the area of media ecology, which is the sort of Marshall McLuhan, but also the world of, the ways, the big shifts between oral and print culture and now into this 21st century culture. We were looking already at a profound, like, we've lost the gatekeepers, we've lost what existed in the 20th century as an information consensus. Like, they say, well, at least if people disagreed, they still agreed on what the issue was. So on a daily basis, the radio would set the tone, right? That would be what the issue of the day is. But in some strange way, it was an era of complacency, and we're in an era now of agonism, and an era of where we have to defend our intellectual ideas in a different manner. And so I feel like one thing that's happened, I just want to tell a Canadian story. We have a large Indigenous population, and I feel that in the last 25 years, Canada has become more aware of the history, the politics, the epistemologies, etc., of Indigenous peoples. So it really makes me wonder, like, how bad is disinformation if I'm more informed today about Indigenous people? So that really throws a wrench into that. It really messes it up. Like, and so I feel like there was a consensus, and that consensus was something in the global north, and there was something that people were just willing to live inside that little information ecosystem and agree on it to some level. And today we're not agreeing, and a lot of people are manipulating that. Like, the problem with disinformation too is the image of not just bots, but of trolls, right? Trolls and troll farms, when in fact the disinformation is coming from the person right in front of our nose. Like, right, it's happening right here now, and it's too easy to say, oh yes, Russian, Chinese, Iranian disinformation. When Elon Musk opened suddenly X, and he showed where the disinformation was coming from for that movement called MAGA in the United States, that was coming from Bangladesh, it was coming from Nigeria, it was coming from all over the world. But so everybody's like, whoa, disinformation from over there. But really, these were little, satellites set up by people, and we could talk all day about this one. This is so interesting.
Yeah. I have the same problem, because I was watching the arrows, and oh God, I'm so sad. I want to do a lot of more questions, but I think that we reached the end. It's one of our webinar. Here in Portugal is the end of the day. People want to go home and take the public transports and so on. And so I just want to share our next webinars. Okay. Okay. I always have like a...
Could we give Belina the last word though? Maybe just
yeah.
In case there's
Yes,
something you want
I'm
to
so
add
sorry.
to-
No, I was just going to just say two things. One, well, actually, maybe three things. One is to remember that the issue that in general is that literacy is becoming a luxury good. And so it's really important that the things that we talk about when it comes to critical thinking and media literacy and information literacy, that it keeps getting heightened and highlighted. Because otherwise, I think with all of the other dialogue of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, we're losing the literacy component, which is the most valuable piece of the dialogue that we're talking about. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I think it's important to note that there is a global cultural context. And while, as we talked about the idea of North America and what is happening, but I think even in the way it's being translated by the media, it's also getting muddled. And so all media is not representing all cultures accurately, evenly, or with the kinds of things that represent what is happening within the areas. And this is true all across the world. I often find that one of the things that gets muddled is when we have, especially the different groups who are arguing about different things, that we're forgetting who it is that we're talking about. And people who are in regions that are having issues in particular know best what is going on, and that is an other literacy. And last thing I just want to mention is very quickly is the International Media Literacy Research Symposium will be actually in Rome, Italy this summer. And if you are interested to learn more about what is happening with media literacy from our global counterparts and North America and so forth, we hope you'll consider joining us. Both Michael and I will be there. Thank you.
Please send me the information. Rome is very close. Okay. I will be very interesting to go. So our next webinars will be in Portuguese. So here you have the names. It will be in Portuguese, of course, about disinformation in education. Thank you again to Professor Michael and Dr. Belinha. I want more hours to speak with both of you and just take notes. I don't want to speak, just to take notes. Okay. Thank you so much. Good morning to both of you, the rest of the day. And thank you. Obrigada.